Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Business of Music. This week we're back in Nashville talking to Randall Foster, the Vice President of Business Development at Symphonic Distribution. Started by independent artists for independent artists, Symphonic is responsible for over 1 million placements from 250,000 artists across the globe. Randall's experience in the music industry is second to none. Having previously been at Ole Publishing for many years, he brings all of his experience to Symphonic to help independent artists get their material out into the world. So if you're like me and want to get your songs out into the world, sit back and enjoy this episode with one of the most knowledgeable people in the music business industry. You might even get a chance to work with him someday.
Thank you for being here and being a part of this series.
Thank you.
I know a lot of people are curious to hear about the way your career got started. And were you always going to be on the path of being in music business, or did you have another career lined out and something just shoved you into this world?
I had an interesting pathway to where I'm at now. I had a couple of watershed moments in my college career. I was going to be a music teacher. That was it. I was going to teach music, and I was a DJ in the clubs around the Kansas City area, and I'd found, in addition to that, I was also working for some production companies, and I was at a concert. I think it was in 1999. I'm dating myself now, and I was at a concert, and it was a 311 concert, and I had been a production assistant on the entire show. Oh. And at this show, the barricade broke, and I was part of the security detail. And
oh my God.
This barricade broke with these people coming over the barricade, and I literally, it was the most scary and exciting moment and of my life, maybe to that date, in that we've got to fix this. And I ended up battening up the barricade with 2x4s that we found from under the stage. This was in an ancient theater called the Uptown Theater in downtown Kansas City. And it was one of those theaters where the floors were made of wood. Uh-huh. And when the crowd would jump, the speaker stacks would go like this. And it was the stuff insurance agents freak out about. But I, standing on the speaker stack, going like this, watching the crowd, there was so much electricity in there. And I walked out of that show having been, covered in sweat and blood and everything else, trying to get these barricades back up. And we did, and the show went on. It was an amazing night. But I walked out of that show going, I'm chasing the wrong part of music right now.
Yeah.
I need this. I need to be closer to the popular sphere of music. I still teach. I teach at universities. I lecture regularly, and
wow.
I am a 4th generation music educator, and I still get to scratch that itch, but while being on more in the popular sphere of music. So that was really my watershed moment. I mean, it's a combination of that and loading speakers out of a club at 3 a.m. when I went, I can't be doing this when I'm 40.
Yeah.
I can't be, as a DJ, which I was making great money, I can't be working till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning as an adult. That's not going to work. At 24, that was awesome. But as an adult, it wasn't going to work. And so the only way I could really finesse this thing outside of that was to become a member of this business we called music. And so I looked around and I found there were only a couple of master's degree programs. I had an undergrad. I did not want to go back for another undergrad.
Yeah.
And Miami and NYU were the two at that point. And I applied for Miami, and it's the only one I applied for.
Yeah.
And I applied, and I hustled and figured out the home address and phone number of the dean of the school and called him and annoyed him until he let me in, basically.
Wow.
And I didn't have the grades to get in. I got in, and they pulled me aside, and it turned out the dean had sat next to my father in the Texas All-State Band.
I love that.
In the 1950s. And they were old friends. And so, I'd called him and begged and pleaded, and he said, you know what, we'll give you a shot. And I got in, and my advisor pulled me in and said, if you screw up, you're out of here.
No pressure.
And I got a 4.0.
Wow.
I was the most average undergrad student, and I was finally doing something I loved. And I got a 4.0 all the way through Miami. And all I knew was that I wanted to be in business. I wanted to be in the music business in some facet. I didn't know what. hadn't distilled it down. I knew there was publishing and labels and live production and booking agents and management. I knew that there were all these facets of it. And for me, the idea of happiness was being able to support myself close to something I'm passionate about, like music. And so for me, I just wanted a gig in the music business. And I was lucky enough that, a couple of people threw me a bone here or there, and I got to where I'm at now.
Yeah, and when we met, you were in the Sync A&R, head of A&R Sync division, and now you are in business development. And I know a lot of people don't really understand titles in this business, because people ask me all the time, what does this division do and what does that division do? Can you explain for people that don't understand what those two jobs entail and how they interrelate as well?
Well, before I met you,
Yes.
I'm going back up. When I got to Nashville, I was in a sales marketing position with a distributor and record label. It's the largest classical record label in the world and distributor in the world. And I worked my way up there to really a business development role that also had a licensing component.
Okay.
And so I was doing millions of dollars in licenses there.
Yeah.
And my success there led to Ole Publishing reaching out and saying, hey, you know what, if you can do that with a bunch of old dead white guys recording, like, what can you do with Timbaland?
Yeah.
And so it was a really beautiful match made in heaven at that moment in my life. And so about 5 years ago, I went to Ole and I was heading up all of the creative sync activity at Ole. And we grew the department both on the licensing side as well as the creative side, and had years and years of successes. Some major ad campaigns that are still on TV that I'm blessed to have been a part of. So, some very, very major movie trailers. Your normal base hits of TV show cues and things like that, which really do keep the lights on. But it was really a fantastic 5 years. And, a ways back, some old contacts of mine, that knew that I had distribution roots and knew that I had, publishing acumen and sync acumen, called and said, hey, what do you think about starting a Nashville office for us? And so I'm betwixt my gigs right now. And in April 1st, I'm opening the brand new Nashville offices for Symphonic Distribution, which is a scrappy independent distribution company that's, it feels like a startup. Everybody is hustling hard for the finish line. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be, it's going to be a situation where we know what the greater good is, and we're all running towards the same goal. And I mean, on a dead sprint, and it's well funded, and work with some amazing artists. Currently I believe they're distributing Bad Bunny and Marshmello and Nicky Jam and a bunch of folks like that. And my charge is to start the publishing company and grow it from a EDM Latin-centric distributor to a really a non-denominational, fantastic digital distribution company that doesn't care about your genre. So singer-songwriters, rock and roll, opera, whatever you have, bring it to us. It's white glove service. We're not really come one and come all in the sense that we do choose who we work with. But if you get in the door, it's an elevated level of service from what you would get from some of the other distributors in the field. And so my title is Vice President of Business Development for them, which literally means I'm looking for opportunity in every facet of the business, which is really fun because it means there's no lane to stay in. There's no rules of engagement. If I spot an opportunity over there and it looks like something that'll work for us, I can turn course and run to it and bring that to the foray for us. And so I'll still be working in sync in that capacity because we have a brand new sync company we've launched, and I'll be overseeing that from a 10,000-foot view, but not on the day-to-day pitch level that I have been doing. So
which is exciting. I'm excited for you and excited. I think for this transition for you, because it feels like it was the next thing. Yeah.
I mean, it definitely, like I've progressed through, sales marketing representative to manager to director to senior director. These titles, you mentioned the titles.
Yeah.
Titles are for the entitled. They don't really matter.
Please say that again.
Titles
so
are
important.
for the entitled. They do not really matter. But at the end of the day, they are a reward for hard work done.
Yeah.
They're the gold medal, or the gold record, as it were. Us in the business, we don't get awarded RIAA platinums. That's just not, we don't get those. We can hang the platinum that we worked on with the artist on our wall, but it's not our trophy, it's their trophy. And so as you progress through the business, this is just the natural progression of things, and some people don't want or care for them, and I'm pretty happy to have moved my way up and through the business into new opportunities.
It sounds like that's kind of what I think inspires you as a person in your field, is opportunity for growth and charting a territory that you haven't been in before.
Well, and a challenge.
Yeah.
A brand new challenge of, I'm in Music City, which to most people that don't live here is country music city.
Yeah.
To those of us who've spent enough time here, we realize that this is a diverse city of musical disciplines, from the finest in classical music with the Nashville Symphony and Opera to, wonderful underground hip hop and EDM and rock, and you think about the Black Keys and you think about, Jack White, some of the most legendary rock acts of the last decade called Nashville home, Kings of Leon, to name another. And so so it's fun for me to be able to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and say, hey, look, we have all this great music here, and there are folks that need to be taken care of. So I'll come in and be their usher into the business and into the distribution space or the publishing space or whichever fits.
I love that. And when you're obviously working a lot, besides developing, finding new opportunities, you work a lot with artists and songwriters. And I know.
my babies. That's the hardest part about leaving publishing for me, is the songwriters. Yeah. I leave behind me a really great staff but I'll be friends with the staff for years. Yeah. And the staff didn't count on me to do anything but just do my job. And they weren't the ones who came to me day in, day out and said, is this good enough? What do you think about this? Yeah. What do you think about the second verse? I'm not sure I'm happy with it. And that kind of interaction and being able to really kind of help cultivate their talent has been one of the most rewarding parts of my career thus far. And it's a piece I'm going to miss dearly. It's like saying goodbye to my children to a certain degree.
Which is important, I think, for people to understand, because there's I think music business, we get such a bad rap on this side of things, like A&R doesn't care or publishers don't care, versus the fact is, like, you have someone like yourself that not only cares about you hitting your numbers and your career goals, but deeply cares about the artist and the writer as a person.
Oh, yeah.
And them not only hitting marks, but achieving dreams and finding that fulfillment.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most magical time in an artist/writer's career is when they're developing.
Yeah.
Once you've made it, you've made it. I mean, once you've gotten that number one, the rest usually falls in place naturally. It doesn't, yes, you have to have a great team, but getting to that point is the sweet struggle, and the thing that I think, I know a lot of people in publishing who are lifers who say, I couldn't be in anything other than publishing. It's what I do. And I get it. I totally get that feeling of accomplishment when you've got this writer who you signed when he was living, with 5 of his buddies in a rental house and waiting tables. And now he's a number 1 artist in country music.
Yeah.
True story. Just happened.
True story.
Just happened to us for the second time.
And he's phenomenal.
And just looking at that, it's like, man, and the really neat thing is they don't forget. I may not work as closely with them as I used to, but those artists that we helped along, they never forget. And that's the really rewarding part of it for me.
Do you think in all of your experience that there's a formula, would you say, for writing a hit song? Do you think there is?
No. Write something original.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yes.
I used to get, and I still do, because I still get approached by writers who know of my sync experience and was in the sync space for almost 15 years. So I'm not going to just turn my back on that time. Who say, what do I need to do to write for sync? which is the worst question in the world, you know. And my answer is always, write the very best song you can write. Write the very best song you can write. Try to make sure that topically a lot of people can fit under it. You know, you want big tent topics. You want, you know, and that's one of the things I preach about on panels is, you know, don't get too specific. Talk about things that are universal to the human element.
Yeah.
Missing home. Everybody misses home from time to time. Comfort, joy, things. I mean, you know, if you look at, you know, The Best Day of My Life was a huge sync success. Everybody has had that moment where you aced the test and you walked out, and in your head you're thinking, God, things don't get better than this.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter what your race or creed is. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. That song applies to you. And that's the thing that I think, you know, the honesty in those kind of songs, in the simplicity in them, honestly, is what works. And I think people overthink it. And I think they look and they go, oh, well, M83 is having a lot of success with things in that style, so I'm going to write things like they do. And I look at them and I go, yeah, but you're a singer-songwriter with a guitar.
Yeah.
How are you going to start programming tracks? Why don't you just get better with your guitar? Be you, and the rest will take care of itself. And I think you've been, you know, around this business in so many facets. But as a songwriter, I think you would agree the things that you've done best with are the things where you've really forgotten about all the extra stuff in the world and you've just done you. And and I think that honesty and that earnest nature of those songs is what sells through. And you know what I always tell people is, even if it never gets synced, you'll always be happy you wrote it.
Right.
You know, instead of, man, I wasted 2 days on something that, you know, is festering over in the corner that I wouldn't even listen to myself. And so that's one of those things where, you know, I think there's no instruction manual. There's no, this is how to do this. I mean, you can study format analysis and you can figure out that, you know, ABACA style songs works. But, you know, to apply that in an academic sense to what you do in an artistic endeavor, I think cheapens the endeavor, and those don't ever seem to make it to the end zone.
Do you think when you're working on, like you'll be working on a bunch of projects coming up, too many to name, do you have, I know people would wonder, do you have a process from the beginning, like the concept of a project that you're starting to work on to the finalization of it? Are there like key steps that you would advise people to take?
Well, I mean, for me, it's not really project based. I would call it client based.
Yeah.
Whether the client's a songwriter or a music supervisor or a label that I want to sign, you know, the question I have to ask myself when I enter into a conversation is what's going right for you right now and what's not. And if things aren't going right, can I supplement those with my skill set? And if I can, then it's really a wonderful match made. And if, you know, on the distribution side, if the very first question I will ask is, who's your distributor and are you happy with them?
Right.
And if the answer is this distributor and yes, I love them, Jeff, you know, Smith there is my favorite person ever. He takes care of me, he answers my calls, he makes me a priority. Then there's no more to talk about. And just kind of peeling back those layers of the onion, like the needs onion, and getting to the real heart of what it is that somebody needs help with. And it's the same way with songwriters or with supervisors, you know. Supervisors, if they send you a brief, it's because they need something from you, you know, and making sure that you can distill down what you're doing for them and deliver to them a solution for their problem, instead of delivering to them whatever the priority is from your boss who wants you to really be pushing this artist. That's really the key to any business relationship, I think. And it doesn't matter if it's in the music business or not.
That's so good. I think some of the most successful people like yourself that I just admire come at business from a place of serving and leading from behind, so to speak. And I think that's so important because a lot of times stuff is emphasized in a way of, oh, I've got to hit the marks for my position, for my boss, or we need to make these numbers. And I find it ends up being a sterile transaction.
Well, and like I have a gentleman who called me the other day and said, hey, I want to tell you about this artist. And I said, well, it's a good thing you called me because I'm moving right now to a new gig. And well, tell me what you're doing right now. So I told him where I'm going. And he said, oh my gosh. He said, I got this artist and she was in this band. And it's a band that if I named everybody would go, whoa. And like their top streaming song on Spotify has 90 million spins.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
And it's her solo project, but she's got no publishing and she's got no sync representation and she's got no distributor and she's got, and you know, it was one of those things where he's like, I really need somebody I can trust to help me do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, we should talk.
Yeah.
But it was one of those, it's almost like kismet that it just all lined up beautifully like that. But I've also walked away from situations that didn't. And you know, it's important, I think, to be honest with yourself and not to overpromise and whatever you're doing. And I've always tried to be very pragmatic, probably to my own detriment. But you know, people will say, hey, well, how much money do you think you're going to bring in? I'll be like, I'm not really going to promise you anything.
Yeah.
Not going to bring anything. And then if I bring something, you'll be really happy with it. Because, you know, there's too many, especially in the sync world where I've been for the last 5 years, there's too many decision makers that are out of my control.
Yeah.
In that chain of command for me to be able to actually, you know, wear it on my sleeve if it happens or doesn't happen. There's far too many.
I've been asking people in these interviews questions that I think I want to know, what is your favorite thing about your job? But also, what do you find to be the hardest thing? Because it always looks on social media, this person's just killing it, they're killing it. And we never talk about, which I think is very helpful for growth and healing for us as a community in the music industry, to talk about, here's the thing I love, but here's the thing that's really freaking hard.
Mm-hmm. My favorite thing, I think by far, is just the people. Mm-hmm. It's the interpersonal relationships. And I just got back from South by Southwest, and it's like it's a family reunion. Every year I go there. I actually host a dinner. I call it the family dinner. And it's just my people. It's just the people that I love, that I know who's going to be where at a given time. And I can pick a restaurant there and we can have 15 of us show up and sit down and break bread and take an hour away from the crazy. And then all jump right back into the venues and go right back to it. But the people I've met and interacted with and been blessed to have become a part of my life and my family are by far the greatest gift in this industry. And I think it stands out from other industries because I feel that creative people tend to wear their hearts on their sleeves, and they tend to give a lot more of themselves in a relationship, even a friend relationship, than non-creative people.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think going to an insurance company conference would have been the same as South by Southwest in terms of like fellowship.
Oh yeah.
And so that's the thing I like most about it. The thing I like least about the industry, that's really hard. That's a really hard one to answer. I mean, I think we're struggling right now to figure out a way forward where everyone is fairly compensated for the work they do. And you know, in a lot of cases, we have corporations that are talking out of both sides of their mouth, and it makes it a struggle. And I feel that we are at sometimes our own worst enemies, in many ways. And it's not a specific thing to name that I hate about the industry, but I feel like we've got to, as a collective, come to a higher plane where we can all respect the art that people put into these things and respect, you know, I feel like the corporations have for too long taken advantage of the art. And it's corporations on every level in every facet of the business. I'm not just talking about labels. It's easy to hate on labels. It's easy to hate on certain digital providers right now because of current events. Yeah. But it's not their fault. They inherited a sick industry.
Yeah, exactly.
An industry that has been sick since the 1940s, if you get right down to it. So I think finding that even ground is tough. And I think that's our single biggest struggle right now. But I think the fact that we love the industry is why we're still trying to find that space.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise, you know, songwriters wouldn't be writing songs still.
Yeah.
These days in Nashville, to make a living as a songwriter, it's harder than it's ever been.
Yes.
There's less songwriters today than there were in the 80s, by a great deal. And because you can't get by on cuts. Cuts don't get you enough money to provide for your family. I know one songwriter who was a writer on Kelsey Ballerini's first album, who had her third single, and 2 weeks before, I met him 2 weeks before the third single went #1, and he was my Uber driver. And I said, well, you got a guitar, what are you doing? Oh, I'm a songwriter. Oh, that's cool, man. Who do you write with? Well, I write with so-and-so, so-and-so. And he'd written with and was friends with a bunch of my writers.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's cool, man. I said, so you just making ends meet? And he's like, yep. Hoping this single gets there. Because, in Nashville,
Yes.
in the country space, once you get a #1, the rest really takes care of itself. I mean, all of a sudden your writing calendar is booked.
Yep.
3 months in advance. You go from a position of having to beg people for co-writes to having to tell people no because you've got too many things going on.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really a watershed moment for a songwriter. And so, I think, if we can find a way to build an economy in this space that keeps everybody fed at every level of the food chain, I think that's my goal. That's my goal. If I leave a legacy that moved somehow in that direction, I did it all right.
That's good. And I love to hear that you say legacy, because I think we always think about the here and now, and sometimes in the middle of all of the now and just the slightly present future, we forget that we all are sort of leaving this legacy. And what do we want our legacy to be? I think that's...
if you think about it, the Music Modernization Act corrected a legacy that was started in 1998. So just do the math on that. In 98... I think 72 or 78 was the last big ratification to copyright prior to 98.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, the actions that are happening right now in Washington with David Israelite and NMPA, the reverberations of that are going to echo for a few decades.
Yes.
That's why these decisions right now are so important.
Yeah.
So I just dated this whole project.
You didn't.
Like 10 years from now, you're going to be sitting there going, what in the world is he talking about? But it's the truth.
I hope it is a dated thing. I hope from your mouth.
Yeah. Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our interview with Randall. We'll discuss how his work at Ole and now at Symphonic is helping artists, songwriters, and singers get their work out into movies, television, film, and advertising.